They were never supposed to be born, not like this, not with the eyes of something older than mankind, staring out from behind a child's face. It was winter in 1812, and Maryland's forests were choked in a silence thick as velvet, the kind of silence that makes your skin prickle without knowing why. The locals said that the ground had frozen wrong that year, that it didn't crack under your feet. It moaned. Something was off. But nobody paid attention, not when the Wilkes twins arrived. Born on a night when every dog in the county howled as one, a sound so loud it kept the sheriff up from 7 miles away. Eliza Wilkes, a farmer's wife and midwife's daughter, gave birth alone in a candle-lit cabin on the edge of Harrow's Wood. Her husband, John, had gone missing 2 days earlier, right after he told the neighbors he found something buried near the well. He never came back. The birth was difficult, unnatural. The first twin came out silent, eyes wide open, not crying, just watching. The second came minutes later, curled in the fetal position, umbilical cord wrapped around her wrist like a noose. Eliza said both had birthmarks shaped like keys, one behind the ear, one on the bottom of the foot. She said they didn't blink, not even once. But here's where it starts to fall apart. Or rather, fall deeper. 3 hours after their birth, the cabin caught fire. No storm, no spark, just flames from nowhere. Eliza survived. The babies were gone, or so the story goes. Except, they weren't gone. 3 days later, the town physician received a letter written in Eliza's handwriting, but postmarked from a place that didn't exist. Inside, 2 locks of hair, and a line that read, "They opened a door. I heard what was on the other side." Nobody believed it. Until 30 years later, when 2 girls, identical, pale, and speaking fluent Latin, were found walking barefoot down on that same stretch of forest road, wearing necklaces carved from human bone, and neither of them had a shadow. This isn't folklore. This isn't superstition. This is documented, hidden, suppressed, because what the Wilkes twins became was never meant to be human. They called them the Pale Daughters, not out of cruelty, out of fear, because something in those girls did not belong in this world. When the twins reappeared in 1842, 30 years after the fire that supposedly took their lives, the town of Abbott's Cross changed forever. They were taken in by the local orphanage, St. Aurelia's home for wayward children, run by the church. But it didn't take long before whispers started to spread. Whispers that Father Renly could no longer silence. The girls never ate. They were never seen sleeping. And worst of all, they spoke to each other in a language no priest could recognize. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't Greek. It sounded wrong. As if the syllables themselves resisted being heard. One nun, Sister Eloise, recorded that the twins would stand outside her door at night and whisper in unison, "We remember." When she asked what they remembered, they replied, "Before." Before what? It got worse. On the 7th day of their arrival, every mirror in the orphanage cracked. The cats stopped coming near the grounds. Birds circled but would not land. The trees bent away from the chapel as if recoiling from a buried infection. And the dreams began. Every child in the orphanage began screaming in their sleep. They spoke of a black staircase that led under the earth, and of a woman with no face, singing lullabies backward. Father Renly tried to intervene. He ordered the girls separated. That night he was found in the baptismal font, drowned. His lungs weren't filled with water. They were filled with ash. The twins were never questioned, never accused, but the fear in the eyes of the other children said everything. When asked about Father Renly's death, one of the twins whispered, "He opened a page he shouldn't have read." By the time authorities were called, St. Aurelia's had already been burned to the ground. A gas leak, they said. But firemen reported something strange. In the ashes where the altar had once stood were 2 small footprints, bare, side by side, facing the west wall, and burned into the stone beneath them was a single word, "Release." And that's when officials stopped writing reports. That's when the church went silent, because they knew. The Wilkes twins weren't orphans. They were carriers. The Wilkes twins didn't disappear after the fire at St. Aurelia's. They were taken. By whom? That's where it gets darker. Because this wasn't the first time. An institution tried to erase them. And it wouldn't be the last. In 1843, 1 year after the orphanage burned, a private train departed Baltimore under armed guard, destination unknown. It was government-funded, clergy-supervised, and its only passengers were 2 silent girls with matching eyes, and no official birth records. Who signed the papers? Why were there military escorts in civilian clothes? And why did every page of the transit logs list the cargo as non-human specimens? That train never arrived at its destination. Some say it derailed in the Catoctin Mountains. Others claim it entered a tunnel near Elk Ridge and never came out. But one thing is certain. 2 weeks later, a woman named Dr. Helen Godwin, a neurologist working for an off-books agency inside the American Philosophical Society, published a confidential letter warning of psycho-ontological contamination originating from 2 biologically female entities, approx age 9. Contamination. She wrote that these entities exhibit memory recall of events preceding their physical birth and possess impossible levels of shared cognitive bandwidth. In plain terms, they knew things they shouldn't, things they couldn't, events from centuries past, including names, numbers, and battle strategies from the War of Independence. One girl drew a map of Fort McHenry as it looked in 1812, from the air. The other described in perfect detail the structure of a pre-Columbian underground temple in Guatemala, a temple that hadn't been discovered until 1996. Dr. Godwin concluded her letter with this: "These twins are not psychic. That term is insufficient. They are consciousness anomalies. The question is not what they know, it's how they're allowed to know it." 2 days after she wrote that, Helen Godwin died of a cerebral hemorrhage. No autopsy was permitted. Her body was cremated within 6 hours. And the twins? They were never officially seen again. But classified surveillance logs from 1871, redacted by the Department of Interior, refer to identical minors with unaging characteristics and ocular anomalies spotted near Fort Detrick, meaning they hadn't aged, not 1 day. This was no longer just a mystery. This was a violation of time itself. The problem with the Wilkes twins wasn't just what they were, it was what they made others become. Because wherever they appeared, people changed. Not gradually, not slowly. Suddenly, like something ancient woke up inside them. In 1854, a series of sealed documents were uncovered during renovations at St. Luke's Cathedral in Annapolis. Handwritten records of a private psychological experiment commissioned by the Archbishop of Maryland. The subject? 2 girls, described as unnaturally identical and impervious to hypnosis. The records never mention names, but their drawings match the Wilkes twins perfectly. These tests weren't clinical, they were esoteric. According to the notes, the girls were placed in separate rooms, blindfolded, and surrounded by lead-lined walls to prevent energetic interference. When Latin scriptures were read aloud in one room, the girl in the other responded in Aramaic. When shown symbols from Mesopotamian tablets, they wept. Not out of fear, out of recognition. And the real horror came when a priest tried to baptize them. He collapsed on the floor, screaming in tongues. His eyes turned completely black for 37 seconds. He survived, but he never spoke again. Witness accounts, silenced for over a century, state that the girls never resisted, never reacted with malice. But those who interacted with them described the same sensation, like their memories weren't their own anymore, as if the girls were rewriting them from the inside. One monk wrote, "They don't steal your thoughts. They awaken something older, something waiting beneath the surface of your mind." Soon, the experiment was shut down. The girls vanished again. But months later, Reports began surfacing of ordinary citizens, teachers, bakers, clergy, suffering spontaneous fugue states, wandering into the woods, speaking dead languages. All of them had visited St. Luke's within a week of the experiments. Authorities blamed it on mass hysteria, but the archived diagrams, long hidden beneath cathedral floorboards, showed otherwise. The girls had drawn spirals, circles, and a symbol not seen since ancient Carthage. A symbol that meant, "I am the door." And that's what this truly is, isn't it? Not a haunting, a portal. Because the Wilkes twins weren't sent to tell us something, they were sent to open something. And now, it's too late to close it. What kind of mind survives time without aging? What kind of child sees ancient symbols and weeps, not with fear, but longing? The Wilkes twins were never just two girls. They were artifacts, living relics. And someone, or something, wanted them hidden in plain sight. In 1861, during the early chaos of the Civil War, a Union supply convoy was ambushed in southern Maryland, not by Confederates, but by its own men. 5 soldiers turned on the rest. No motive, no explanation. Except for what was found in the wagon, a sealed iron crate, humming with an electromagnetic frequency too high for human ears. Inside the crate were 2 leather-bound journals. One belonged to Dr. Elias Monroe, a frontier psychiatrist exiled from Massachusetts for conducting unlicensed cognitive boundary experiments on orphaned children. The other had no name. But it was written in 2 hands, perfectly mirrored entries on each page, right to left and left to right, like the minds behind them shared the same origin. Those mirrored pages told stories no child should know. One entry described in detail the disappearance of the Roanoke colony, not as legend, but as observation. Another recounted the Black Death from a first-person perspective. But the most disturbing journal entry was just one line, repeated again and again, in both directions. "I am not what you think I am." The convoy was headed to a Union-sanctioned facility in Harper's Ferry, later identified in covert documents as Site Theta 7, a location rumored to study pre-human cognition and memory transmission. Only one soldier from the ambush survived, a man named Private Samuel Leeds. He was court-martialed, found unfit for duty, and institutionalized. Before he died, he carved something into the walls of his cell, a symbol, the same Carthaginian spiral found beneath St. Luke's. Beneath it, a message: "They're not twins, they echoes." That phrase, "they're echoes," appears again years later in military surveillance transcripts from 1890, connected to a covert project involving childlike figures of identical appearance with mirrored cognition, functioning as dual hosts to a singular, non-linear intelligence. By then, the government wasn't trying to understand the twins. They were trying to contain them, and failing. Because the Wilkes twins were not running from us, they were running ahead of us, through time, through thought, and through the fractures in reality we refuse to admit exist. By 1870, the Wilkes twins had become a ghost story in Maryland. Whispers in alleyways, warnings told to children in secret, "Don't follow the girls with no shadows." But by then, it was far too late. The shadows weren't behind them, they were inside us. The deeper we look, the more we find traces, not of the twins themselves, but of their echo, a pattern repeating through minds, names, and bloodlines. In the psychiatric records of the Ashton Institute, a now demolished asylum north of Baltimore, there's a file marked only Case number 715, Dual Consciousness Anomaly. The patient was an 11-year-old girl found wandering barefoot through a cemetery, unable to speak anything but Old Latin and Enochian. She was covered in strange markings, not carved, not painted, branded, like she'd passed through some invisible fire. They said she only responded to her reflection, only spoke when facing a mirror, and when asked her name, she whispered 2 syllables that didn't belong to any known language, except when later cross-referenced with the mirrored journal found in the Union convoy, they matched the very first entry on page 1. Arna. Not a name. a code. The institute's lead doctor noted that the girl's brain exhibited bilateral activity impossible for a child her age, as if two minds of equal strength were running parallel, but never touching. He wrote, "She dreams in stereo. Each eye sees a different world." But she was not alone. Within the month, 2 more children were admitted, both identical to her in every genetic marker. No records of parents, no birth certificates, and worst of all, no variation. Same face, same fingerprints, same scar behind the left ear, a scar that matched the Wilkes twins exactly. The doctor began to suspect what others feared. This wasn't reincarnation, it wasn't hallucination, it was recursion. A looping entity, split across time, fractured into bodies, but never disconnected, and in moments of alignment. They remembered each other, fully, instantly, and that's when it began again. The writing on the walls, the forgotten languages, the voices beneath voices, whispering things no child should say. In 1871, the institute burned to the ground. The children were never found. But months later, 2 identical girls were seen boarding a train to Virginia, smiling, silent, and casting no shadow under the midday sun. There are patterns that the human brain is wired to ignore for safety, for sanity, but some patterns refuse to be silenced, and when they appear in blood, they cannot be dismissed as coincidence. In 1873, deep within the archives of the Maryland Medical Society, a sealed dossier was unearthed, unlabeled, unsigned, and bound in red twine. Inside, 46 birth records, all identical in 2 ways. Each child was born under a blood moon, and each child had a twin who vanished before the age of 7. No cause of death, no missing persons filed, simply gone. Among the records was a chilling anomaly. One of the Wilkes twins, Clara, had a recorded birth again, under a different name, 11 years after her original death certificate was signed. Same fingerprints, same retina patterns, same scar behind the left ear. But this time she appeared not in Maryland, but in Tazewell, Virginia, a town that, by all known history, never had a hospital until that week. According to eyewitnesses, a strange temporary field tent was erected overnight by men in unmarked gray coats. No insignias, no names, just a single symbol stitched in crimson onto their sleeves, a broken hourglass with the sand suspended mid-fall. The locals called them the Watchmen. The tent disappeared the next morning, but records show that 3 babies were born there that night, all girls, all identical, all reportedly silent at birth, but eyes open, unblinking, staring straight into the midwife's face. The midwife went mad 3 weeks later. She scrawled the same phrase over and over again into her prayer book. "I delivered Time's daughters. I am already forgotten." When her belongings were seized, one item stood out, a photograph. 3 girls, dressed in white, sitting in a circle, holding hands. But here's the part no one could explain. The image had no photographer, no shadows, no light sour, and yet each girl's face was captured mid-movement, as though time itself had paused to make the imprint. Behind them was scrawled a number, 17, the same as the case number from the Ashton Institute, the same as the cipher embedded in the twins' mirrored journal, and later, the same numeric code found etched into the spine of a corpse in 1902, a body believed to be one of the Wilkes twins. Only the body was found frozen in salt in a cavern beneath a church that was never built. By 1874, the Wilkes case had officially vanished from public records. No news reports, no medical transcripts, nothing in the census. Almost as if someone had intentionally erased them. But hidden beneath that silence was a growing trail, a web of disappearances, all involving pairs, siblings, twins, lovers, even strangers who shared no relation, but were found frozen in perfect symmetry. Then came the Eleanor Green incident. Eleanor was a midwife turned occult investigator who had begun tracing these twin anomalies across the eastern seaboard. In her journal, she made a disturbing observation. They don't reincarnate, they migrate, like echoes, seeking resonance. She believed the twins weren't simply returning. They were seeking vessels, bodies tuned to a specific frequency of memory and trauma. She identified 11 known pairs across 7 states, each with identical anomalies, a circular scar behind the left ear, dreams of burning mirrors, and knowledge of languages never taught. Her most shocking discovery came from St. Agnes Orphanage in Annapolis. 2 girls, aged 9, arrived separately from different cities, but within 48 hours, they began speaking to each other in a dead dialect traced back to 13th century Carpathia. They were placed in separate dorms. Yet every night, the nuns reported finding the 2 girls asleep beside one another, despite locked doors and guards. One night, a priest placed a crucifix in their shared bed to deter them. The next morning, he was found in the bell tower, eyes burned, tongue removed, and the crucifix melted into his chest like wax. Written across the walls in ash, "We are not yours." After that, Eleanor was banned from the premises. But not before she collected a final piece of evidence, a drawing made by one of the girls, depicting 2 trees growing from the same root, each reaching in opposite directions. Beneath them, the symbol again, a broken hourglass, and between the trees, a mirror, cracked, bleeding. Eleanor sent the drawing to a colleague in Boston who specialized in anomalous artifacts. He never received it. The train carrying the package derailed under clear weather. Every passenger on board vanished. No bodies, no wreckage, just rails twisted into the shape of 2 intertwined snakes and an empty seat where the package once sat. Eleanor's journal ends that night. Her final entry reads, "They've remembered who they are, and now they're looking for each other." There are events that vanish from history not because they're irrelevant, but because they are intolerable. And in November of 1874, in a secluded psychiatric ward near Bowie, Maryland, one such event unfolded. The hospital was called St. Elouan's, a converted plantation manor repurposed to house highly anomalous juveniles. It was government-funded but run privately. No medical license required, no public oversight. Patients were described not as children, but as specimens. Every record logged their left ear scar, their mirror anxiety, and an extreme fear of salt. Then came specimen number 12, number 13. Identical girls, found naked and unconscious on the steps of a Masonic temple in Baltimore. No names, no guardians, only a message pinned to one of their gowns. They have never been apart. From the moment they arrived, clocks in the ward malfunctioned. They would run backward, or freeze, or, most chilling of all, strike 7:17 at random hours, every single day. Security guards reported hearing laughing from the salt storage cellar, which had been sealed for over a decade. When they opened it, they found only one thing, a perfect circle of black sand with 2 tiny handprints, pressed inward from below. The twins were kept in separate rooms, and every night both would scream until their noses bled, but never at the same time. One would begin, the other would finish. Their drawings filled entire walls, but none depicted humans, only symbols, hourglasses, snakes, cracked mirrors, blood moons, and most notably, a door. Always the same door. Wooden, no knob, engraved with the phrase, "Enter twice and never return." On the 7th night, a new patient was admitted. An 11-year-old boy named Milo Avery, mute since birth. The moment he saw the girls, he whispered, "You brought the door." That was the last sentence he ever spoke. The next morning, all 3 children, were gone. No broken locks, no prints, just a puddle of salt water in each of their beds. Investigators found a camera hidden in the hallway. The footage was only 6 seconds long. It showed the 3 children standing in front of the mirror, holding hands. Then, as the clock behind them struck 7:17, the mirror didn't reflect them. It opened, and they stepped through. Not a scream, not a shadow. Just the soft sound of whispering, as if the glass itself had begun to breathe. By the winter of 1875, the town of Greenridge, Maryland had earned a grim reputation, the place where twins go to disappear. It started with livestock. Farmers began finding their animals in pairs, perfectly mirrored, 2 pigs with matching spiral scars, 2 calves born still, eyes wide open, facing each other as if trying to remember. Then came the children. On January the 2nd, the Lawrence twins, age 6, vanished from their bedroom despite all windows sealed shut. Their beds remained neatly made, their shoes placed precisely parallel on the floor. In their place, a single antique mirror propped against the foot of the bed, not belonging to the family, no fingerprints, no dust. Police covered it with a sheet and locked it in the evidence room. The next morning, every mirror in the house had turned to face it, without being moved. The town priest, Father Rook, was the first to call it an invitation. He warned that these weren't kidnappings but reunions. He said some twins weren't meant to be split at birth, that they were fragments of a whole, and the universe was correcting the error. People laughed, until the Keller sisters disappeared next. Then, the Adams boys. One by one, pairs vanished. No ransom notes, no signs of struggle. Only 2 things left behind. A hand-drawn map of Greenridge, always marked with an X at the town's dry well, and the same symbol carved on every front door. A mirror cracked at the center, with vines growing out of it. Father Rook led a group to the well under full moonlight. Inside, they found nothing but reflections, shimmering like water, but on dry stone. One man dropped a stone in. There was no sound, only an echo, his own voice, whispered back in reverse. Another man climbed down with a lantern. He never returned, but the lantern was thrown back up, still lit, in its glass, a child's drawing. 2 figures fused at the chest, smiling. Their eyes, empty black voids, but weeping salt water. Greenridge was abandoned within months. Today nothing grows there. No birds fly over it. The only sound is wind howling through broken shutters, and sometimes, if you stand near the dry well after dusk, you'll hear footsteps, tiny, synchronized, approaching in pairs. But when you turn, there's nothing behind you, only your reflection, smiling when you're not. Some mirrors show you who you are, others show you who's waiting. By spring of 1875, rumors of the twin disappearances reached Washington, but it wasn't the government that responded. It was a private expedition funded by a shadowy syndicate known as the Meridian Circle. They weren't lawmen, they weren't clergy, they were scholars, occultists, and former surgeons, men excommunicated from every institution they once belonged to. Their leader, Dr. Edgar Voltaire, had published a banned thesis in 1869 titled The Echo Soul, on the duality of human spirit and reflection. He believed every person had a mirrored soul, and that twins were the most fragile gateway between the physical and the other plane. His obsession? Mirror twins, those with reversed organs, reversed fingerprints, even reversed handwriting. He claimed they were born not from nature, but from interference. And now interference was happening again. The circle arrived in Greenridge on April 6th. They sealed the town and placed mirrors in every room of every home, hundreds of them. Each one was coated in sheep's blood and placed under moonlight. They waited. At precisely 7:17 p.m., every mirror cracked at once, but not from impact, from the inside. And in the largest one, placed before the dry well, they saw it. A face, childlike, pale, but it was inverted as if it belonged to someone who didn't know how to be seen. It opened its mouth, and a low tone vibrated through the glass. Not a sound, but a frequency, one that cracked the circle's instruments and caused 3 men to vomit blood. Dr. Voltaire recorded the tone on phonograph. He played it backward, and then forward again. When slowed down, it wasn't a tone at all. It was a phrase, repeated 3 times. Send them back, send them back, send them back. That night, Voltaire vanished. His journal was found beside the dry well, soaked in what it looked like tears. The last entry read, "They're not missing. They're in the mirror, and they're waiting for the rest of us to look long enough to forget which side we're on." After that, the Meridian Circle disbanded. All remaining members either vanished or were committed. One, before hanging himself in a hospital in 1891, scratched a single sentence into the wall with his fingernail. I saw my reflection blink, and I didn't. It was in the winter of 1876, just after the last snowfall, that a lone figure arrived in Greenridge, a woman in black, carrying no luggage, only a mirror wrapped in linen. She called herself Aurelia Knox, though that name didn't appear on any census, deed, or birth record. No one had seen her enter, no one saw her leave. But she stayed for 3 days. Locals, what few remained, claimed her presence changed the air itself. The birds fell silent. The clock stopped ticking, and the snow that fell around her never melted, not even when touched. What she brought wasn't just a mirror. It was something far older, an obsidian slab, blacker than shadow, said to be carved from the floor of a dried lake in Babylon. An ancient looking stone, known in whispers as the Vesper Eye. It did not reflect light. It swallowed it. She placed it over the dry well at midnight. Lit candles around its edges, each one made from wax and human hair, and began to chant in a language even the wind seemed afraid to carry. Witnesses reported seeing their own reflections moving independently. Some turned away in horror, others knelt entranced, watching themselves smile without smiling. Aurelia's voice echoed through the valley. Only one may remain, the other must descend. Then she stepped into the mirror, not through it but into it, as if folding into paper, vanishing without a ripple. For 3 days, the stone remained. No one dared touch it. Then on the 4th morning it was gone. In its place lay a small, handwritten note, burned at the edges, written in reverse. The ones you called twins were never yours to keep. They are echoes, and echoes always return home. Not long after, strange reports emerged from towns hundreds of miles away. Pairs of children seen walking backwards through fields, identical infants crying in sync inside sealed basements, flickers in the corners of mires, roars like someone about to step out but changing their mind. The phenomenon spread. Whatever happened in Greenridge didn't stay there. It was a rupture, a tear in the border between what we see and what sees us back. And the twins? They were only the first to cross. History doesn't forget. It simply waits for someone curious enough to uncover what should have stayed buried. In the spring of 1877, a cartographer named Harland Pike was hired to update the regional maps of western Maryland. He wasn't from Greenridge. He didn't know the stories, and he didn't ask questions. But when he arrived, his instruments failed him. Compass needles spun like drunken dancers, his barometer cracked under pressure from something that wasn't air, and each time he drew the outline of the town, it changed. Buildings he had just measured were suddenly gone, roads he walked vanished behind him, and in every sketch there was a well that didn't exist on any official map, sometimes drawn in the town center, sometimes on a hill, sometimes inside someone's home. But most disturbing were the 2 faint figures that kept appearing in his renderings, never drawn intentionally, always facing away, always holding hands. When Pike asked about them, locals turned pale. Some refused to speak. Others warned him plainly, "Don't follow where the twins walk, because they walk backwards and lead you where no map can." Despite warnings, Pike grew obsessed. He began redrawing the town daily, chasing its shifting shape like a dream slipping through memory. But with each drawing he grew weaker. Witnesses said he began forgetting names, then faces, then his own reflection. He locked himself in a room at the inn and scrawled maps across the walls, ceilings, even the floor. Ink ran dry, so he used blood. On his final day, he burst into the chapel, eyes sunken, voice ragged, holding a mirror he had smashed and reassembled into a mosaic. He pointed to the fragments and whispered, "They've charted something inside us. The twins. They aren't trying to return. They're trying to redraw us." He collapsed before he could say more. When they went to retrieve his maps, every sketch had gone blank, as if erased not by man, but by some force that knew it had been discovered too soon. Only one thing remained in his satchel, a cracked compass, still spinning, and a page that simply read, "There is no north, only back, and back, and back again." By the summer of 1877, whispers about the Greenridge twins had begun to crawl into the minds of men who should have known better. Scientists, surgeons, spiritualists, skeptics, all pulled like moths to a lantern that burned through logic. Among them was Dr. Howard Meeks, a Harvard-trained neuroanatomist who dismissed every tale as backwoods superstition until he saw the original birthing ledger. 2 names, same weight, same time of birth. But the signatures of the attending physician and midwife were written backward, as if mirrored by unseen hands. Not once, but 3 times over. That was enough. He arrived in Greenridge with 2 trunks of equipment and an ego twice the size. He wasn't there to learn. He was there to disprove. The first thing he did was exhume the grave. 2 headstones, side by side. But when they lifted the lids, one casket was empty. The other held 2 bodies, identical, folded into one another like a grotesque reflection frozen in time. Same age, same face. But where one twin had a birthmark on the right shoulder, the other had it on the left, as if they were mirror images, reversed not just in body but in essence. Meeks ran tests in his rented quarters, X-ray, blood analysis, nerve conductivity. He sent letters to Boston describing anomalies he could barely put into words. The tissue resists classification. One twin has blood that reacts to light, the other to sound. Their spinal cords form loops, not lines. It's as though they're not designed for forward motion. He concluded something that made even the staunchest academics nervous. These are not 2 people. They are one being, split not by biology, but by direction. The night before he planned to return to Boston, Meeks was seen at the edge of the well speaking to his own reflection in the water. He was heard muttering, "They aren't dead, just reversed." And then, "To fix this, I must go backward." In the morning he was gone. All they found was a page torn from his journal, waterlogged and barely legible. "I fear the mirror shows not what we are, but what waits to replace us." Since then, the town began to change faster. Maps faded quicker, voices echoed longer, and behind every child's laugh, a second laugh followed, just slightly delayed. In every town that harbors a secret, there's a final witness, someone who sees the truth but is too broken to speak it outright. For Greenridge, that was Agnes Holloway. She lived on the edge of the woods, in a crooked house with mirrored windows and clocks that all ticked in reverse. Locals called her Mirror Agnes. Some said she was mad. Others said she'd seen the twins. She never left her home during the day. Only at night, when the fog rolled in low and thick, would her candlelight flicker through the trees like a ghost trying to remember its way home. In 1891, a census taker arrived, young, ambitious, eager to do his job thoroughly. He knocked once. No answer. He knocked again, and the door opened by itself. Inside, the walls were covered in mirrors, not for vanity, but for surveillance. Each one was blackened, burned at the edges, like they had witnessed something unholy. Agnes sat in a rocking chair, her back to him. When he asked her name, she didn't respond. When he asked how long she had lived there, she whispered, "Since before they split, since before we all forgot how time works." He assumed she was senile until she said his full name. First, middle, and last. Then his birth date. Then the exact time his mother first held him. When he asked how she knew, she pointed to the largest mirror. "They visit through that one," she said. "They don't speak with mouths. They speak with reflections. The twins never died. They were folded, and the fold is getting thinner." The census taker, now shaken, looked into the mirror. He saw his own face, but not as it was. Older, eyes clouded, skin pale, and behind him, 2 figures, head to head, like a Rorschach test of the human soul, watching, waiting. Agnes warned him, "If you stare too long, they'll notice, and if they notice, they'll finish what they started." That was his final entry. His ledger was full and abandoned in the woods, filled with strange symbols, mirrored letters, recursive loops, pages that repeated themselves backward. Agnes was never seen again. But her house remained. And every full moon, neighbors say the lights turn on. Not electric, candlelight. And if you walk too close, you won't see your own reflection in the window. You'll see your shadow, smiling back. By 1895, Greenridge was no longer a town. It was a memory, folded, distorted, hidden in the seams of maps that no longer matched the land. Railways refused to stop there. Postal deliveries were returned to sender with no explanation. Cartographers noted a strange anomaly. The terrain near Greenridge shifted every time they tried to record it. Trees would bend differently, streams would flow backward for hours, then resume their natural path as if nothing happened. And yet, people kept trying to find it. One of them was Jonathan Creel, a traveling photographer with a fascination for places that shouldn't exist. His journal documents everything. July 4th, 1895. Found an unmarked road, no signs, just fog. Feels like walking into someone else's dream. July 5th. The town exists, but wrong. No birds, no insects. Wind moves, but the trees don't respond. July 6th. Took photos of Main Street. When I developed them, the buildings were reversed. Signs were in mirror writing. One photo shows children staring at me, but there were no children there when I clicked the shutter. And then, he made a grave mistake. He set up his tripod across from the old Holloway house. Midnight, full moon, no light but his flash. He took a photo, just one. Then he looked inside the camera's viewfinder and saw something impossible. Not the house, but himself standing across the street, camera in hand, but slightly older, his face more hollowed, his mouth smiling, even though he wasn't. The older version of him lifted the camera and took a picture back. And in that moment, Jonathan fell. His next journal entry scrawled in panic. I saw them. I saw the twins. They wear my face now. Every step I take, I feel like I'm being overwritten. Like a shadow walking backward is replacing me. He tried to leave Greenridge, but the road was gone. Replaced by loops. Familiar trees roared. He repeated endlessly, signs that kept flipping left to right, his compass spinning like it had no center. Eventually his camera was found by a search party. Inside, 36 photos, all overexposed, except one. A photo of Jonathan staring into the lens, but behind his eyes, something ancient, split, and smiling. Historians call it a hoax, but if you flip the photo upside down and hold it to a mirror, his expression changes. He stops smiling and starts screaming. There are things that hide in silence, not because they fear you, but because they are studying you. In 1897, a linguist named Dr. Eleanor Bryce arrived in Greenridge claiming to be sent by a university. She was looking for linguistic anomalies tied to regional folklore, but in truth she was chasing a rumor that the twins did not vanish. They changed language itself, turned meaning into a trap. She came across a peculiar book in the Old Town Library, one that had no title and no front cover. It began from the center and spiraled outward, not in lines, but circles. Every page a wheel of symbols, each symbol slightly different than the last. And when she tried to sound them out, she began to hear her own voice whispering back from the pages, from the walls, from inside her skull. She wrote in her notes, "It's not a book, it's a doorway. Language is how we control reality, and this thing speaks in loops, not lines. Like the twins, like time here." Eleanor began muttering to herself, but not in English, not in Latin, not in any known dialect. She spoke in palindromes, mirror speech, and sentences that reversed mid-phrase. They never left, she said. They echoed. They became the language in this place. That's why maps don't work. That's why memories loop. We're inside a grammar trap, a town spelled wrong on purpose. One night she walked into the forest with a lantern and the book. never to return. A month later, hikers found a spiral of ash deep in the woods. At the center was a single page untouched by fire. On it, a message, written backward: "They understand you now because you taught them how to listen." From that day forward, anyone who tried to speak aloud in Green Ridge would experience glossolalia, unintended speech in unknown tongues. Tourists complained of whispering trees, mirrors that spoke in second person, and voices calling them by childhood nicknames they'd never shared with anyone. It was no longer just the twins haunting the town. It was language itself, infected, mutated, turned into a mirror maze of meaning. And if you said the wrong phrase, even by accident, you didn't just invite the twins in. You invited yourself out. In early 1898, something else began to happen. Green Ridge wasn't just erasing people, it was replacing them. Not all at once, but gradually, quietly. It started with a woman named Mrs. Helen Carrick, a widow who had lived in Green Ridge since 1869, well-liked, soft-spoken, always wore a lavender brooch. Then, one morning, a local grocer noticed something odd. She came in asking for canned milk as always, but he swore her eyes were now green, not brown. She didn't recognize him. She didn't remember her husband's name. And the brooch? Gone. Replaced by a mirror pin, reflecting his face back at him. The grocer checked the town records. No one named Helen Carrick had ever lived in Green Ridge, not even once. By the time he tried to tell others, it was too late. More replacements followed. The mayor's son no longer cast a shadow. A schoolteacher began writing every child's name backward on the chalkboard, without realizing it. A man named Joseph Kent came home one night and found another Joseph Kent already sitting at his dinner table, eating stew with his wife, calmly smiling. One of them screamed. The other didn't. The wife couldn't tell which was which. She said, "They were both so calm, but only one of them blinked." The unblinking Joseph was never seen again, and neither was the wife. Soon, everyone in town began to question themselves. Am I still me? Was I ever? Green Ridge became a theater of imitation. Voices repeated out of sync. Footsteps echoed before they were made. And children were born with birthmarks shaped like quotation marks. Every photograph taken showed slight differences in people's expressions, even within the same frame. It was as if identity itself had been infected, not by disease, but by mimicry. Some called them echo bodies. Others said the twins had never been children. They were always mirrors in flesh, entities who mimic. But what you feared most? Being forgotten, being replaced, being misremembered by the people who once loved you. The town wasn't haunted in the usual sense. It was haunted by inaccuracy, by versions of yourself that were almost right, but not quite. And if you stared at your reflection too long in Green Ridge, you might notice something small, a twitch, a blink, a breath out of sync, and realize that version in the mirror isn't you anymore. It's waiting for you to notice, so it can stop pretending. By the spring of 1899, the federal government had begun to take notice. A series of intercepted letters and missing census reports drew the attention of an obscure branch of the U.S. Office of Insular Affairs, a division tasked with territorial anomalies. They dispatched Agent Marshall Green, a pragmatic investigator known for handling unclassifiable phenomena in remote regions. He arrived in Green Ridge under the guise of a railroad inspector. What he found never made it to his final report, because Agent Green never filed one. But in 1922, his field journal surfaced in a private estate sale in D.C. bound in oilcloth, pages torn, scorched at the edges. And what was legible painted a far darker reality than any rural folklore ever could. He wrote, "There's no normal architecture here. Buildings repeat. A house with 2 identical stairwells, a church with 4 pulpits. No clocks, none work. Every dog I've seen has 2 different colored eyes, like they're watching different timelines." Locals gave him polite answers. Too polite, too synchronized. He noted how 3 different people gave the exact same sentence, word for word, with the same breath pause. The fog settles late, but never misses a morning. He circled that line, wrote beside it, "Scripted?" The deeper he probed, the more reality unraveled. He claimed to see a man blink vertically. He stood in a field for 45 minutes watching shadows of birds overhead, but there were no birds in the sky. At one point, he stayed in the town inn. Woke up each morning in a different room, even though he hadn't moved. Each room had a single painting, same frame, but the scene inside slightly changed. One day the trees were upright. Next, they were upside down. On the last morning, the painting was entirely black. That day he packed to leave, but at the train station he wrote this final entry: "I'm not going back, because I did go back. And I saw myself arrive here again, smiling, holding this journal." He dropped the notebook on the platform and vanished into the fog. A week later, a boy found it, but every name inside had been reversed, as if someone or something had edited it from the other side. Since then, government agents don't enter Greenridge, because the last man who did came out twice. Once in flesh, and once in imitation, and no one's sure which is which. By the dawn of the 20th century, Greenridge had become a cartographic ghost. Railroad maps erased it. Mail routes detoured around it. Even telephone directories omitted its existence, as if the town had quietly slipped beneath the surface of reality. But Greenridge still stood, breathing, watching, mimicking. And the twins? They were no longer children, or perhaps they never were. Because something emerged from them, not a power, but a pattern, a kind of psychic contagion. The town's layout began to mimic the human mind, a main road like a spine, alleyways curling like memory folds, basements that led not downward, but inward. Visitors who entered Greenridge described a pull, not physical but emotional, like the town knew exactly what part of you was weakest, and then built a house there. One man, a theologian from Baltimore, entered for 3 hours and emerged raving. He claimed he had seen his own sins given form. He said the town built a cathedral out of his childhood guilt, and in the pulpit stood a perfect replica of his dead mother, whispering scripture in reverse Latin. No one believed him, until his journal revealed drawings, architecturally precise, of structures that didn't exist on any map, but were later photographed by a cartographer who vanished in 1902. The town became a living feedback loop, reflecting not just behavior but internal wounds. If you carried shame, you'd see it in the wallpaper. If you hid fear, the trees whispered your secrets at night. And if you ever lied, the town would split you. One version who told the truth and one who didn't. Both would walk the streets. Both would speak your name. But only one would remember the dreams you had as a child. They said Greenridge no longer needed mirrors, because the people had become the mirrors, reflections of sins, fragments of lost timelines, echoes of choices never made. The Twetan, and they weren't the origin, they were the invitation, a doorway, not a destination. And by the time anyone realized that, they were already part of the town, not just in it, but of it. Because Greenridge doesn't claim you like a normal haunting. It copies you, rewrites you, then leaves the original somewhere deep, buried beneath the floorboards of a house you've never built, but somehow still recognize. The final known investigation into Greenridge came not from government nor science, but from a psychiatrist named Dr. Elias Warren. In 1903, he published a paper called The Town That Thinks Back. It was immediately suppressed by Harvard Medical Journal and discredited as fiction, but the original manuscript survived, hidden in the basement archives of a private asylum in Virginia. Dr. Warren's theory? Greenridge wasn't a town at all. It was a neural construct, a kind of externalized subconscious, formed, fed, and expanded by unresolved trauma, collective repression, and buried guilt. In his words, this is not a haunted village. It is a mind wearing the mask of a town, a psychosphere, a living projection of what we refuse to process. He described how the twins acted as emotional synapses, triggering not phenomena, but reflections, amplifying dormant thoughts, turning repressed pain into architecture. In one entry, he detailed his own nightmare after spending only one night in the town. I walked into a home with no windows. Every wall was covered in family portraits, but each face was my own, aging backward. At the center of the house was a crib. Inside was not a baby, but my mother, crying like an infant. I awoke screaming, holding my own medical license. But it had someone else's name on it. He wrote of objects that learned, rooms that reassembled themselves after you left, and mirrors that didn't show your reflection, but your intended self. He claimed the town had grown beyond location, that people who had never been there were starting to dream about it, that a nurse in New Jersey described waking in the night to find Greenridge's main street carved into her forearm, like a map burned from the inside out. Warren believed Greenridge had become a psychic parasite, attaching itself to the American unconscious, feeding on the shadow self of a nation in denial. He ended his manuscript with a warning. Do not enter Greenridge looking for ghosts. You will find them, but they will not be dead. They will be you, and they will be smiling. 3 days after writing that line, Dr. Warren was committed to the very asylum that archived his work. To this day, he still mutters the same sentence. The fog settles late, but never misses a morning. They say every town has a story, but Greenridge isn't a story. It's a warning that reads you back. No sign welcomes you. No roads truly lead there. And yet, if you carry the right kind of wound, the town finds you. Its fog arrives first, not a mist from the sky, but a kind of forgetting, a soft distortion of memory and map. You don't remember the turn you took. You just arrive, like you've always been there. People describe it differently. Some say it's always raining. Others swear it never rains at all. But every account agrees on one thing. Time doesn't move forward in Greenridge. It moves deeper. The houses breathe. The soil remembers. And every mirror, window, or shadow isn't a surface. It's an eye. You don't see Greenridge. Greenridge sees you. And it shows you not what you fear, but what you've buried. The real you, the monstrous you, the version of yourself you never had the courage to meet. Children vanish not because they are taken, but because the town gives them what they asked for. A secret friend, an escape, a place where no adult can follow. And those who go searching, they don't find bodies, they find replicas. Smiling children with glassy eyes, who remember everything except being human. The twins? They were never born, not in the normal sense. They were summoned by the collective grief of a town that could not forgive itself. Their bodies were vessels, their eyes, windows to the town's soul, a soul that no longer fit inside walls and roads. And you, yes, you, just by hearing this, you've felt it, a pull. A name you never heard, but somehow recognized. A flicker in the mirror where your reflection hesitated. Greenridge is not a place you visit. It's a place that opens inside you. And once it opens, you never fully leave. Not in sleep, not in waking, not even in death. Because somewhere beneath your daily thoughts, beneath your laughter, or silence, your prayers, there's a town still building itself, one house at a time, and the next one has your name on the deed.